So from oral tradition to modern technology. So it's a long way that poetry has come here through the generations. And now we understand that in modern times, because of technology, poetry can spread anywhere. So when poetry was recited or remembered in the caves, on the banks of the river, under the trees. You think about Valmiki or think about Homer, the way they recited their unwritten poems, only they remember. But still it continues. Even in India, the oral tradition is really, really important. We are writing poetry, but many of us are not writing. They don't have script. They don't write. We have so many languages, more than 1,000 languages spoken in India, but not written. They don't have script. So their poetry is written in those languages. And then China Academy sometimes invites writers and poets from those languages. So for the last 5, 6 years, we have seen here at China Academy, especially during the time of the Festival of Writers, that we have invited so many traveling poets, or poets from the humanity, poets from, what should I say, from such languages which are not known. I mean, names of languages are not known. So now, when we have a subject like the popularity of poetry, whether poetry reading is popular or, I mean, reading means voicing the poet, or the spoken word tradition in modern times. Whether spoken word poetry is popular or written poetry is popular. I just to quote one statement of T.S. Eliot when he was the editor of River and River. So, T.S. Eliot said, it's on record. He said that if I have 100 people, 100 readers, I'm happy. I cannot claim more. And you think about, how it is time that the time that he was going through and the time that we are going through are different times. Time past and time present are different. And the time future is going to be another kind of time. So I think that we are happy with just 100 readers of poetry. We want to, it's a very simple saying, if you want to spread or extend or go beyond your boundary, beyond your language, that's beautiful. When your poem is translated into another language, you are reborn. You have a new birth. You have new wings to fly in in another language. So in a way, I find that in modern times, because of technology, we have lot many ways to popularize poetry. It's not just one way of reading poetry. We have so many ways to read poetry, but still some people think that we are in modern times, we are writing a kind of poetry, a kind of modern poetry, which is not that popular. And some others are claiming, yes, it's for the first time in the history of poetry that we have technology, we have online ways, we have so many ways to popularize poetry. Let me invite, Abhay, would you like to start this, please? So Abhay is going to speak now. How much time do I have? 10 minutes each. 10 minutes each. And then if you have you can repeat.
uh, Distinguished conversation and poets and writers on the dais and all of you, the audience, eminent, uh, all eminent people here. Poetry is dead. Someone shouts happily every now and then to the relief of parents and those among the educated who never read poetry. but there is no such luck. The most outrageous thing about poetry is that poems composed in such a lackadaisical manner end up in anthologies your kids are supposed to study in school. Not only that, but they may fall in love with them, memorize them, and try to imitate them. A successful novelist, for example, with luck, can make wonder, as can a memoir writer. And a third-rate painter can do quite well if a hotel chain or a bank starts fancying his escapes and sunflowers. But poets ever made a living poetry. In past centuries, poets could hope for a dinner invitation from some nobleman holed up in his castle to entertain his drunken guests, or even receive a piece of land from the king after writing a paean to his various conquests and massacres. But poets, think of the poets. To write a 600-page novel takes years. A poet stands by the window watching the rain fall or looks at the lock of hair of his old sweetheart, scribbles something down on a piece of paper, and is through for the day. That's so unfair. These are the words of Charles Civic, who passed away recently, from his essay, Poetry and Money. So, but he he still believes that poetry, with no bookstores left as as it is happening now, and libraries shut down, lovers in the need of additional romantic stimulus will have to reach for their iPhones and find a poem suitable for the occasion to meet each other. Poetry's strength comes from such practical uses. And that's my belief that probably poetry may end up being the only literature which will be read by people. With the shortening attention spans, with easy accessibility, and the practice of poetry. Imagine a day spent without a poem. We all consume poetry in different ways without knowing about it. And you start the morning with the Gayatri mantra or or Namaskar, and end the day with listening a song which is based on the malforms. You are consuming poetry day and night. All the songs you hear, all the advertisements, the jingles you hear, that's all poetry. When you do bhajan or listen to Hanuman Chalisa, that's all poetry. So poetry is very much part and parcel of life, from birth to death. No ritual in India is complete without a poem, without the mantras which have been written in Sanskrit. So to say that poetry is dwindling or its popularity is dwindling is completely mad actually. So today, in fact, you look at the statistics, more poetry is being published today than it has ever been published historically. There are more publishers of poetry today than has been in the past. So, poetry is not only finding its way in traditional publicity, but also through new media like Instagram and other social media platforms, YouTube, and so on. So, I believe that poetry is something which predated our species. It's not just a human phenomenon. Poetry is, in a way, is a sense, when you say that, uh, when you have a great experience, you say it's very poetic. Or it's when you say good painting, you say it's visual poetry. Or if you look at architecture, great architecture, you say it's poetry in stone. So poetry is a sense, it's a sense of immense beauty which we feel. And this sense predates our species and will outlive us. Thank you.
Thank you, Owen. What he has said is absolutely right. In this sense, I would like to attempt to cite one example, which is just from Kolkata. I am from Kolkata, I'm from Bengal. So we have an international booklet, international booklet, and you'll be surprised if you visit. You see the queues, lines of people, readers, waiting in the queue to buy books, and many of them are buying poetry books. You cannot see queues for buying books anywhere in India. So this is one example. Another example, only everybody yesterday I was invited to read the poems before a capacity audience of more than 1,000. And they were celebrating poetry. And they are not poets. They're just readers. They have been reading poetry. And they are absolutely, we are lucky, we are fortunate, those who know Bengali culture, Bengali heritage, Bengali tradition, they know that it happens in Kolkata. So when we talk about the dwindling popularity of poetry, I just had a rise now. And at the same time, I must agree with what Amoy has said, that beauty is everywhere, from your day one to the last. Next, I would invite Guru T. Ladakhi. With the permission, I'd like to sit and talk to you, chit chat rather than a formal speech. Um, uh, it is true that what Abhay said, but I'll speak from the perspective of somebody writing poetry in English in India. And it's tough if I didn't have any other. So, not that poetry was optional livelihood before, but the traction as far as writing poetry in English is not really, you can't really make a decent livelihood. Having said that, there are more people writing poetry on different platforms, but I'm not sure how many are actually being read or read seriously. Now, poetry as a genre has now many subforms. You have the spoken word, which is performance poetry. There's more emphasis on style, speech, the intonations, the dramatic pauses. But the kind of written poetry that most of us here write, you need layers of, uh, it has layers of content because poetry itself, in a sense, is the concentrate of the distilled outcome of experiences. So, the reflective aspect of poetry, which is a kind of poetry that I think all of us in the past write and are practitioners of that. Those layers of poetry is kind of dwindling because I'm not sure. I think in the as our chairman said, our chairperson for the said, in vernacular and regional poetry, poetry is still particularly in Bengali, Malayali, Tamil, it's still huge, and I think you can make a decent living. But and of course, Bengal has a very strong tradition of poetry. Uh, you know, in culturally also they are known towards that because your a lot of cultural yeah, cultural aspects linked to it. Uh, but writing in English in India is unless you are become say you your no publisher will kind of give you a second thought. You rather publish your self-help book or a cookbook or a travel book and make far more money than what you can ever hope to make on go. It's one of my first books in America got for 3 times. Still, I didn't make money. Anyway, so it's a different topic for another day. So, um, so what are the why is poetry dwindling? Of course, the space of written poetry is now being taken over new media platforms like Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and others. And you're generally the attention span of most readers have kind of shrunk. And I don't know if it's good or bad, but yes, we are in a way to adapt. The other way now, if you look, what is the way forward? And we have in terms of this huge opportunity where a lot of the regional poetry needs to be translated to English. And one of my great friends that quote from one of these responses, he says when he writes in English, but he says that when I write, I want my sound like as it is being translated. So he writes primarily in English as it is being translated because it has a lot of the idioms which represent history, its culture, its geography, its upbringing, its particular lived experience in that area. So as far as the the topic of the day, whether poetry is dwindling, I am not well informed about, but I believe in the regional languages, poetry may be growing actually, not necessarily in English, and English is a feature to write poetry in India. Though I believe in America, you can make a decent living as a poet. Um, and I had the opportunity last year in 2023 to be part of the international writing program, in which many of the people there were the director himself being very biased towards poetry. But normally, you would find in any publishing house if you look at the catalog for poetry is very narrow, very small. I mean, the biggest chunk is your travel books, self-help books, cookbooks. Those are the biggest spinners and makers for them. And I guess what can we do about it? Maybe things like Saitya Academy is the right platform, but what are we teaching them in school? When I was in school, we had a wonderful anthology called the Panorama, and it gave a very beautiful
mix of classical poetry and contemporary poetry, having both Indian contemporary poets like Nassim Ezekiel, um, uh, and our great poet who passed away 2 years ago, Jayanta Mahapatra. So we did have a mix, and G. Patel was there. So it gave you actually a panorama of the Indian poetry scene. So I guess in a way, way I look at it is, unless you are able to sensitize children, and I believe since then the panorama has been withdrawn, so you have less appreciation of poetry, and therefore the fate is still in the balance, so to say. I hand over the microphone. If you have questions later, we can always chit.
Thank you, Mr. Lavaki. As you have referred to Jayant Mahapatra, very interesting thing that happened to Jayant Mahapatra. He was the pioneer of Indian English poetry in a way, maybe in many ways. And towards the end of his life, he was writing in Odia. What he was so humbly, he said that the first time in my life that somebody who writes in English is saying that writing in English is poetry, especially, is a struggle. And there is a red carpet to welcome for the writers in English all over the world. And he also lived in America, but he is saying like that. I especially congratulate you. It's really something different because it happened to John. In a lot of dialogues with John, every time he used to say, whenever he met me, he used to speak in Bangla. Whenever he talked about poetry, he talked about his origins, about Odia poetry, and he didn't want to talk about. But he was. What kind of paradox in India that I was exploring when I was with him. Our next speaker is Jitendra ji. Yeah, Jitendra Srivastava. Please, a round of applause for him.
इस सत्र की अध्यक्षता कर रहे सुबोध सरकार जी और मित्रों, मुझे लगता है कि साहित्य अकादमी ने जो ये विषय दिया है कविता की घटती लोकप्रियता, इसके साथ क्वेश्चन मार्क होना चाहिए था। इसको मूल्य निर्णय की तरह नहीं, प्रश्न की तरह देखा जाना चाहिए। यह मूल्य निर्णय नहीं है। कविता की लोकप्रियता घटी या नहीं घटी, ये कई चीजों से तय होता है। अभय जब बोल रहे थे तब भी और आप जब बोल रहे थे तब भी दो तीन चीजें हैं कि कविताएं मोटे तौर पर हमारे समाज में कई तरह से रहती आई हैं। लोकगीतों के रूप में रहती आई हैं। जब से मनुष्य का विकास हुआ, लोकगीतों का साथ साथ विकास हुआ। कविता का एक सबसे पॉपुलर फॉर्म जो रहा है। दूसरा, लोकप्रिय माध्यमों से भी कविता आती रही है। अगर हिंदी की बात करेंगे तो कवि सम्मेलन का मामला रहा और हर भाषा में कवि सम्मेलन जैसी एक ट्रेडिशन, एक परंपरा होती आई है। लोकप्रिय माध्यमों में सिनेमा भी है। सिनेमा के लिरिक्स भी गीत की ही श्रेणी, मतलब कविता की ही श्रेणी में आते हैं। देखना यह है कि जब हम कविता की घटती लोकप्रियता की बात करते हैं तो दरअसल मुख्य धारा की कविता जिसे हम कहते हैं, मेन स्ट्रीम पोएट्री जिसे हम कहते हैं, उस पर बात करने लगते हैं। यह भी जानना जरूरी है, कम से कम हिंदी के बारे में तो मैं कह सकता हूं कि कभी भी कोई ऐसा दौर नहीं आया भक्ति आंदोलन और स्वाधीनता आंदोलन से जुड़ी कविताओं को छोड़कर जब कविता बहुत ज्यादा लोकप्रिय थी। सिर्फ दो टाइम ऐसे रहे, भक्ति पोएट्री बहुत लोकप्रिय थी और स्वाधीनता आंदोलन का जो दौर था, उसके बाद साथ कविता हमेशा विशिष्ट वर्ग की चीज रही है, खासकर मेन स्ट्रीम पोएट्री, क्योंकि कविता आपसे एक निश्चित तैयारी की उम्मीद करती है। कविता, अच्छी कविता कभी भी अपने भावक से, अपने सहृदय से, अपने पाठक से एक तैयारी की उम्मीद करती है, तभी वो पहुंचती है लोगों तक। इसीलिए हिंदी में पिछले 70-75 वर्षों में जो पूरा दृश्य है, उसमें कवि सम्मेलन की कविता बिल्कुल अलग हो गई और छपने छपाने वाली कविता बिल्कुल अलग हो गई। कवि सम्मेलन की कविता दिनों दिन डाइल्यूट होती चली गई। एक दौर था हिंदी में जब मंच की कविता और छपी हुई कविता में कोई अंतर नहीं था। सारे बड़े कवि मंच पर थे और पढ़ते थे। लेकिन धीरे धीरे मंच की कविता एकदम इस हद तक लोकप्रिय होती चली गई कि वहां पर तत्व जैसी चीजें खत्म होने लगी। बहुत कम जो गंभीर कवि अब भी गीत गजल जैसे फॉर्म में काम करते हैं, कर रहे हैं, वो भी हाशिए पर चले गए मंचों पर। ऐसा दौर आया कवि सम्मेलनों का। तो वो लेकिन जो गंभीर कविता है, तो कविता की लोकप्रियता नहीं घटी है, मेरा ये मानना है। कविता कविता कभी भी देखिए, कवि सम्मेलनों की बात छोड़ दीजिए, पॉपुलर फॉर्म के लिए लिखना छोड़ दीजिए, तो सिर्फ कविता लिख के जीवन नहीं जिया जा सकता है। ये कभी संभव नहीं है। राजदरबारों की कविता को छोड़ दीजिए और या तो मंचीय कविता को छोड़ दीजिए, तो आप कविता लिख के जीवन नहीं जी सकते। आपको कुछ और उद्यम तो करना ही पड़ेगा। और मुझे ये बराबर लगता है कि अगर आप कविता को या साहित्य को सीधे सिर्फ जीवन से जोड़ लेंगे, जीवन चलाने के लिए जोड़ लेंगे, तो उसमें डाइल्यूट होने की संभावनाएं बढ़ती चली, समझौते करने की संभावनाएं बढ़ती चली जाती हैं। आपको समझौता करना पड़ेगा बहुत सारी चीजों से। इसलिए इन दो चीजों को अलगा के देखना चाहिए। अगर किसी की जीविका चलती है कविता से, बहुत अच्छी बात, प्रशंसा की जानी चाहिए, लेकिन उससे जोड़कर नहीं देखना चाहिए। हम हमेशा सोचते हैं, होता क्या है कि कविता, आपने एक अच्छी कविता लिखी, अब आप उसको किसे सुना रहे हैं? जरूरी नहीं है कि आपने किसान के बारे में जो कविता लिखी है उसे किसान समझ ले। यह आयरनी है, यह विडंबना की तरह हो सकता है कि किसान के बारे में लिखी कविता किसान नहीं समझ रहा है, लेकिन इससे उस कविता का महत्व नहीं घटता, इससे वो कविता कमजोर नहीं हो जाती। और जरूरी नहीं है कि जो कविता किसान ने समझ ली वो महान कविता हो गई। कल भी एक बातचीत हो रही थी कालजयी को लेकर के, और वो इसी तरह से था कि जो मुझको प्रिय है वही कालजयी है। ऐसा नहीं होता है। तो कविता के साथ इन चीजों को देखना चाहिए और देखने की जरूरत। अब कविता में तो ऐसा है ना कि मेरा चना बना अलबत्ता, बेचूं कानपुर कलकत्ता। छंद तो बन गया, ये छंद तो बन गया, लेकिन ये कविता तो नहीं है ना। ये बात तो नहीं बनेगी, इसका कोई मतलब नहीं निकला ना। हो सकता है कि कोई कविता फ्री वर्स में हो, फ्री वर्स की दिक्कत है, फ्री वर्स की दिक्कत है, मुक्त छंद की दिक्कत है। और हिंदी में खास तौर, अंग्रेजी में भी फ्री वर्स की वही दिक्कत है जो हिंदी में दिक्कत है। या अदर जो इंडियन लैंग्वेजेस हैं उसमें भी फ्री वर्स की देखिए, फ्री वर्स के साथ यह है कि संगीत का साथ उसको नहीं मिल पाता, वो कंठ में उस तरह नहीं समा पाती कविता। लेकिन वह आपको सोचने समझने के लिए विवश तो करती ही है। तो दो तरह की चीजें हो गई हैं। जो पढ़ने वाली कविता है आज की तारीख में, वो सुनने लायक नहीं रह गई है, और जो सुनने वाली कविता है उसमें से अधिकतर पढ़ने लायक नहीं रह गई। सुनी हुई कविता को अगर आप छाप के पढ़ लीजिए तो लगेगा क्या पढ़ रहा हूं मैं। हाँ, जो बहुत लोकप्रिय कविता है, लगेगा इसमें तो कुछ है ही नहीं। सुनते वक्त कानों को अच्छा लग रहा था, लेकिन उसमें कोई अर्थ नहीं है। छपी हुई कविता की दिक्कत यह है कि जब कोई सुनाने बैठता है, और वही अगर भावक समुदाय सहृदय नहीं है, जैसे हम लोग बैठे हुए हैं, कहीं पर देखें एक पॉपुलर पोइट को आप ला करके यहाँ पर खड़ा कर दें, देखिए भीड़ लग जाएगी, बड़ी संख्या में लोग सुनने आ जाएंगे। आप ज्ञानपीठ अवार्डी को ला के यहाँ कविता सुनाइए, कम लोग आएंगे। इसका मतलब यह नहीं है कि जिसे सुनने के लिए 1 लाख आ गए वो बड़ा कवि हो गया, और जिसे सुनने के लिए 200 आए वो छोटा कवि। कविता की लोकप्रियता नहीं, देखिए थियराइजेशन में हम लोगों को बराबर सचेत रहना चाहिए। किसी चीज को जो हम थियराइज करें तो हमें ये देखना चाहिए कि कोई चीज समाज पर क्या असर डालेगी, दूर बहुत दूर जाकर के समाज पर, साहित्य के ट्रेडिशन पर उसका क्या असर होगा। बहुत सारे लोकप्रिय कवि अपने साथ अपने समय के साथ बीत गए, आज उनको कोई याद करने वाला नहीं है। लेकिन बहुत सारे लोग जिनको अपने समय में भी बहुत थोड़े लोगों ने पढ़ा, आज भी उन्हें पढ़ रहे हैं, 100 साल बाद भी पढ़ेंगे, क्योंकि वो हमारे समाज के लिए, हमारी चेतना के लिए और पूरी मनुष्यता के लिए बहुत जरूरी लोग हैं। तो ये हम लोगों को देखने की जरूरत है। चुनौतियां रहेंगी। जो फ्री वर्स की कविता है, हम सब जो लिखते हैं, अधिकतर जो हम में से लिखते हैं, हमको भी ये सोचने की जरूरत है कि किस तरह हम अपनी कविता को अधिक से अधिक लोगों तक ले जाएं। प्रयोग के नाम पर अनर्गल प्रयोग ना करें। बहुत सारे ऐसे प्रयोग होते हैं कि हम तो प्रयोग कर रहे हैं और उस प्रयोग का कोई माने मतलब नहीं होता। प्रयोग न तो साहित्यिकता में कोई बढ़ावा देती है और न ही संप्रेषणीयता में उससे कोई बढ़ावा आता है। तो कविता की लोकप्रियता नहीं घटने वाली है, बशर्ते कवि भी सचेत रहें। कवि को ये पता होना चाहिए कि वह क्या कह रहा है और किस तरह उसी बात को कहेगा तो अधिक लोगों तक जाएगी चीज। मैं कविता लिखता हूँ, बहुत गद्यात्मकता बढ़ी है हिंदी की कविता में। हमारे वहाँ गद्य को कवियों का निकष कहा गया है, कवियों का प्रतिमान माना गया है हमारी परंपरा में। लेकिन कविता के गद्य में और कहानी के गद्य में अंतर तो होना चाहिए। पंफलेट के गद्य में और कविता के गद्य में अंतर तो होना चाहिए। अगर दोनों का प्रोज एक जैसा है, पंफलेट का भी और पोएट्री का भी, तो फिर पोएट्री हम कैसे लगाएंगे उसको? प्रोज से दिक्कत नहीं है, प्रोजाइक होने से दिक्कत नहीं है। दिक्कत यह है कि आपको ये फर्क करने आना होगा कि आपकी कविता में कवित्व बचा रहे, उसकी लय बची रहे, आंतरिक लय बची रहे, और जब कोई सुने तो लगे फ्री वर्स है लेकिन है तो कविता। अगर ये चीज रहेगी तो जो संकट थोड़ा बहुत दिख रहा है कविता के सामने वो नहीं होगा। जब से फिक्शन का दौर आया, नॉन फिक्शन का, ये होता ही आया है कि फिक्शन पढ़ने वालों की संख्या ज्यादा रही है। एक समझ यह भी रही है कि कविता सुनने की चीज है और कहानियां पढ़ने की चीज है, इसलिए भी कविता की किताबें अब कम कम बिकने लगी हैं। कुछ तो हमें लगता है कि अ, इस पर भी फोकस है कि कविता की किताबों को पहुंचा पा नहीं रहे हैं। जो लोग कविता पढ़ना चाहते हैं उन तक किताबें हम पहुंचा भी नहीं पाते हैं, कवि भी और प्रकाशक भी। तो एक उस ढंग से भी विचार करने की जरूरत है। कविता के सामने संकट जरूर है, लेकिन वह संकट समय का संकट है, चुनौतियों का संकट है। जैसे जैसे मनुष्य समाज, हमारे बहुत पुराने बड़े आचार्य रामचंद्र शुक्ल ने कहा था कि जैसे जैसे सभ्यता का विकास होगा कवि कर्म कठिन होता चला जाएगा। तो कवि कर्म तो कठिन हुआ है, कवियों का जीवन भी कठिन हुआ है, लेकिन कविता है, कविता रहेगी। जब तक मनुष्य रहेगा कविता रहेगी और कोई लोकप्रियता घटने वाली नहीं।
Thank you very much. Um, there is an idea, I mean, an intellectual idea, intellectual quote unquote. The idea is, uh, you can say it's an underground idea that if a poem is a popular poem, then it is a bad poem. So now the question comes to my mind that you think about Tukaram, you think about Reed, you think about Tagore, they're still popular. And you cannot escape them in your everyday life. You have to quote. If you don't quote, your friend will quote. If your friend doesn't quote, friend's girlfriend will quote. This is how it goes on in. So the question is popularity. Popularity is a bad thing. This is our idea, okay? But Subhash Mukhopadhyay made a point. It's a fantastic, very simple, very fantastic point. That I have to write a poem which should be good and popular at the same time. That is the height that most of the bhakti poets in India, right? They were immensely popular. They were with the people. They they attended every event of community. So I have a question. I have a feeling. I don't know. Are we in modern times, because of technology, divorced two states from reality, from community, from neighborhood? We are more into technology. We are more online. I have no cash now in my pocket. I badly needed 1,000 rupees. Nobody was able here to give me. I said, yes, I have phone. I will pay you. No, this is not possible. I wanted cash. So it's like that because we depend on technology. So next, I will request Maheshji. Huh? Maheshji is going to speak. Are you? Please. We'll be happy if you are here for a few minutes.
Please, please.
Yeah, I know. We all know you have to.
नमस्कार, गुड आफ्टरनून। आज के ये सत्र की अध्यक्षता स्वीकार करने वाले मेरे मित्र प्रबोध जी सरकार, मेरे कलीग्स और फ्रेंड्स। 34 इयर्स के बाद हम लोग मिल रहे हैं। मैं बंगाल गया था साहित्य अकादमी की ट्रैवल ग्रांट लेके 91 में, और वहाँ अमृत बाजार पत्रिका में हम मिले थे ऑफिस में, और बाद में शांति निकेतन गए। या I was also young. I'm still young. I'm still young. Anyway, so सुबोध जी ने मेरी एक कविता, कलकत्ता पे कविता थी, वो थी मराठी में, उसका ट्रांसलेशन किया वीणा आलासे ने बंगाली में, और आपने वो शांति निकेतन में रीड आउट की थी। ये ह्यूज क्राउड वाज। तो वैसा ही क्राउड अभी महाराष्ट्र में है। हमें पॉपुलैरिटी घटी नहीं हुई है, ठीक है। समय थोड़ा कम है, मेरा एक पेपर है इस पर लिखा हुआ, वो 10 मिनट में खत्म हो जाएगा। Dwindling popularity of poetry. The popularity of poetry has significantly declined over time, with studies indicating a steady drop in readership, especially among younger generations. Once a dominant literary form, poetry now struggles to compete with other creative mediums like music, film, and visual arts. Several factors contribute to this decline. A changing educational priorities. Schools place less emphasis on poetry analysis and appreciation, reducing exposure among students. Second is fast-paced modern life. The contemporary audiences often prefer quick and easily digestible content, making the deep engagement required for poetry less appealing. Perceived inaccessibility. Traditional poetry forms may seem complex or outdated, discouraging new readers. तो इसके के पॉइंट्स क्या है? Decreased readership. Research confirm a sharp decline in poetry readership compared to previous generations, particularly among youth. Or shifting cultural priorities. With the rise of digital entertainment, short form content, and streaming services, poetry finds itself pushed to the margins of popular culture. इसीलिए आपको लगता है कि कविता की लोकप्रियता घटती जा रही है, लेकिन जैसे जितेंद्र जी ने बताया और सभी मान्यवर वक्ताओं ने बताया कि वैसा जजमेंटल होना मुश्किल है। अब जजमेंटल नहीं हो सकते कि कविता मर गई है, अभी कुछ नहीं है इसमें, वगैरह वगैरह। पहले लग रहा था कि थोड़े ही लोग थे इस ऑडिटोरियम में, बाद में आने लगे तब लगा कविता जिंदा है। हमने बात भी की। यस, हाउसफुल। आपने आपने शुरू में जो स्टेटमेंट किया सुबोध जी, वो हमें एक्सेप्ट नहीं है, एक्सेप्टेबल नहीं है। कि हम बैटल नहीं लूज किया है, तो कविता तो जिंदा रहेगी। जब तक कविता है तब तक जो विश्व है, और जब तक विश्व है कविता रहेगी। अभी क्या काउंटर पॉइंट्स है, मैं आपको मेरे कुछ एक्सपीरियंसेस महाराष्ट्र में जो हम लोग करते हैं प्रयोग कविता पॉपुलर करने के लिए और किए हैं आज से, तो मैं बताऊंगा आपको। आपने बिंदा करंदकर का नाम सुना होगा, ज्ञानपीठ अवार्ड विनर, पोएट, बड़े ऑथर और ट्रांसलेटर। और दूसरे ज्ञानपीठ अवार्डी विनर अपने डॉक्टर भालचंद्र नेमाड़े। तो भालचंद्र नेमाड़े जी मंच पे ज्यादातर कविता वगैरह कभी नहीं करते, लेकिन बिंदा करंदीकर जी ने अपनी जिंदगी भर, पूरी जिंदगी में कविता के बहुत इतने परफॉर्मेंसेस किए थे, उसका जिक्र भी आएगा। वो तीन पोएट्स थे, पाड़गांवकर, बापट और करंदीकर। तो उन्होंने कैसे की पॉपुलर पोएट्री अपनी, तो मैं उसके पहले थोड़ा सा बताता हूँ कि काउंटर पॉइंट्स क्या है इसके लिए, कि dwindling पॉपुलैरिटी है क्या। तो पॉपुलैरिटी लगता है कुछ पोएट्स जो है ऐसा जो स्टेटमेंट करते हैं, उनका पॉपुलैरिटी कम हो रहा है। उनको लगता है कि पूरे पोएट्री विश्व की सब पॉपुलैरिटी कम हो गया, ऐसा नहीं। बहुत सारे पॉपुलर है लोग, और डिस्पाइट इट्स विनिंग mainstream appeal, poetry continues to thrive in new and evolving forms. Rise of online poetry, poetry slams and events, and diverse voices and themes. Contemporary poets explore a broader range of topics and perspective, resonating with modern readers in unique. The poetry has not disappeared; it has simply transformed. जैसे जितेंद्र जी ने भी बताया क्या सुबोध जी ने भी बताया कि तुकाराम जी और ये अभी तक है ना जिंदा, तो लेकिन उसका जो अभी फॉर्मेट बदल है, अभी यूट्यूब में आप पोएट्री पढ़ सकते हैं, सुन सकते हैं, देख सकते हैं, फेसबुक है और व्हाट्सएप पे हमेशा 4 लाइनें रहती है आपको, तो वो भी कभी कभी अच्छा रहता है, खाली जोक्स नहीं आते हैं, कभी कभी अच्छे शेर और गजल का कुछ अच्छा पोर्शन आपको मिल जाता है व्हाट्सएप पे। तो इसके लिए जो मीडियम है वो बदल चुका है, लेकिन पोएट्री का पॉपुलैरिटी अभी तक जिंदा है। It has not disappeared, it has simply transformed. While its traditional readership has declined, poetry continues to reach audiences through new platforms. As a poet myself, I have observed the enduring appeal of live performances. I have written Marathi poetry for over 40 years and performed for the last 25 years. Alongside 6 fellow poets, I travel across Maharashtra and India for over a decade, receiving tremendous responses from audiences of all backgrounds. Young attendees at our symposiums often shared that poetry deepened their understanding of the world. However, over time, our group disband, disbanded due to the passing of 2 members, and another, Kishore Kadam, also known as Soumitra, became occupied with his acting career. हम 7 लोगों ने बहुत साल यानी 15 साल तक हमने पोएट्री के सब परफॉर्मेंसेस किए ऑल ओवर महाराष्ट्र और across India. Even in 2025, poets like Ashok Naigavkar, very popular poet of Maharashtra, Ashok Naigavkar from our Kavitancha Gaava Dave, Let Us Go to the Village of Poems program, continues to draw enthusiastic crowds. Maharashtra remains home to vibrant poetry gatherings such as the annual 3-day Shodh Marathi Manacha conference organized by Jagatik Marathi Academy. This event, held for the past 16 years, experiments with interdisciplinary performances combining painting, sculpture, and poetry, gaining remarkable appreciation. While traditional poetry may have lost ground, new forms such as spoken word and performances poetry are gaining momentum, especially in digital spaces. Events like poetry slams and poetry out loud competitions are actively fostering poetry's revival among younger generations. Many modern poets create works that blend classic and contemporary styles, telling powerful stories that reflect the realities of our time. Poetry remains a means of artistic and emotional expression rather than mere intellectual pursuit. Marathi poetry has a rich legacy dating back to the 12th century when Mahanubhav Saint poets like Chakradhar Swami, Mahim Bhatt, Bhaskar Bhatt Borikar laid its foundation. By the 17th century, poets like Saints, Pandits, and Shahirs, many folk poets, popularized poetry through Abhanga, Pandit Virutte, and Povada forms. Vishal Sud, regarded as the father of modern Marathi poetry, emerged in the late 19th century, and in the 20th century, B.S. Mardekar revolutionized the form by introducing radical realism. The 1960s and 70s saw poets like Inda Karandikar, Vasanta Bapat, and Mangesh Padgavkar revitalize poetry through live performances, making it a cultural phenomenon across Maharashtra. However, renowned poet critic Dilip Purushottam criticized this trend, claiming that it turned poetry lovers into mere spectators rather than co- connoisseurs. Despite this, public performances by poets like Narayan Surve, Nado Mahanor, and Suresh Bhatt continued to captivate audiences. In 1987, Ramdas Phutane pioneered ticketed poetry events with his program India is Sometimes My Country, proving that audiences were willing to pay for poetry recitals when marketed effectively. Although fewer people now buy poetry books or borrow them from libraries, live poetry performances remain a thriving cultural activity. poets like Vaibhav Joshi and Sandeep Khare still attract full house audiences, and lyricist Guru Thakur's performances are in higher demand. Marathi ghazal poets continue to host well-attended mushairats. Actors like Kishore Kadam, Sachin Khedekar, Dr. Girish Oak, Mukta Barve, and Suraj Joshi have also played an instrumental role in keeping Marathi poetry alive in contemporary times. They perform serious poetry on the stage. The future of poetry, classic poetry may be fading in mainstream popularity, but its influences persist in unexpected ways. Two lines are there. Poetry has infiltrated everyday life, becoming a marketing tool and a form of emotional expression for younger generation. Yes, yes. Many writes poems to loved ones, share feelings online. तो ये सब है और पोएट्री आपको लगेगा कि अभी तक जिंदा है और जिंदा रहेगी. थैंक यू वेरी मच.
Ji. Ashok, nice. Uh, Now I would request Rajendra Mehta to speak.
Should I speak in Hindi or should I speak in Gujarati or in uh, English? This is the question for the people like me who are actually coming from the vernacular language background and participating in such a program. Uh, I'll talk about the Gujarati, being a student of Gujarati language and literature. So, once upon a time in Gujarati, we had stalwarts like Professor Umashankar Joshi, who was also presided the Sahitya Academy, and Niranjan Bhagat. They were the great poets and stalwarts of Gujarati literature who have, attracted a huge number of audience whenever they have performed poetry. And interestingly, they have worked in the genre which are almost marginalized in the digital era. Now, the problem with Gujarati popular poetry is that the first challenge which Gujarati literature in general and Gujarati poetry in particular is facing is the marginalization of meaningful writing and marginalization of meaningful poetry. Now, what happened in last 2.5 decades, particularly from the mid 90s, that first of all, I would like to underline this that Gujarati, by and large, Gujarati speaking community is a trading tribe, not a reading tribe. Hence, what happened that from mid 90s, we have two popular spiritual gurus. They have literally occupied the entire Gujarati literature. They have a huge number of followers. Now, the technical point over here is that when any the literacy ratio of that follower is always under question. That means they, the spiritual gurus used to organize literary programs twice in a year in two different places and used to call all the popular poets. Hence, the Gujarati contemporary poetry became a performing art and becoming a performing art because they have to perform in front of a huge number of audience with below average literacy because they are not the audience. They are the followers of those gurus. They have to come to listen to them. They have come to see them. They have to come to gather some knowledge from their spiritual guru. And poetry recitation is a part of that ritual. And obviously, they have been paid high. That means, in other words, the poetry has been literally purchased. And thus, the Gujarati poetry became a popular and entertaining genre. Second thing is, once upon a time, there was a time 30, 40 years ago that the genres like sonnet and khandakavyas have been written and poets like Professor Umashankar Joshi, who wrote Khandakavyas and sonnets, won Gyanpith in 1988. And there are others to name. So the Gujarati scene is like that. The publication of any of your fresh writing is not a problem nowadays because the the entire population, I mean 90% population of younger generation, it is being said that India is a country of young people. So younger generation people have their own social media platforms. So whatever you write without any kind of moderation, filtration, you can publish as it is in any of the social media or digital platform and immediately get the instant response in the form of share, like, comment, tag, copy, paste, forward, etc., etc. So the publishing your write-up was once upon a time a very tough job because it has to go through a proper process of filtration, moderation, and screening. That thing has now gone because those literary magazines once upon a time were having great editors who used to, reject your write-up, be it poetry or any other write-up in any other genre or form in prose. A very good thing in a way that a creative writer can directly connect with his or her followers or lovers. But at the other hand, it has harmed the meaningful poetry. And again, in Gujarati, the only popular genre of poetry is ghazal. So, in other words, Gujarati poetry is confined to a particular genre, and the other genres are, systematically marginalized, which were popular genres once upon a time, like Khandakavya, sonnet, and other genres. So, I think there are two languages in India. One is Urdu and one is Gujarati. That the genre of ghazal is as popular as anything. It's popular like anything. And to write ghazal, you don't need a particular training. You There are few popular, meters चंद जिसको कहते हैं हम, उसको आप सीख लीजिए and you don't need the filtered language, परिमार्जित भाषा की उसमें जरूरत नहीं है, and you get it published, and you also can get it published whenever it is wanted. I mean publication on demand. If you want 10 copies, your publisher will give you 10 copies published. If you want 50 copies, you can get 50 copies. And there was a time, so Subodha has put a pause button. So the moral of the story is, particularly Gujarati literature is
Sorry,
living in
Rajendra,
the
please.
age of marginalization of meaningful poetry. Thank you, Subodha, and the audience.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry to the bad thing. Uh, Now we have two more speakers. Uh, Shankita Saikia and Shubhra Bandapata. Shankita, please.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair of today's discussion, eminent co-discussions, and respected poetry and literature enthusiast audience. It is my great privilege to present a few words before you today on the subject of poetry, a significant creation of human civilization, deeply connected to human intellect, contemplation, emotional aesthetics, creativity, and linguistics, as well as intellectual discourse. At the very outset, I would like to clarify that considering the vastness of the subject, our discussion will be primarily focused on Assamese poetry. Hence, The topic of my discussion will be the declining popularity of poetry, a discussion in the context of Assamese poetry. The phrase declining popularity of poetry brings forth multiple truths. Alongside a counter question arises: Has the has poetry truly lost its popularity? Moreover, another inevitable question follows: Does this decline pertain to qualitative or quantitative popularity? There was a time when poetry was the primary medium of expressing the fine arts of human thought. Observing the evolution of civilization, we find that painting and poetry are among the oldest artistic expressions of humanity. For thousands of years, poetry served as a dominant form of artistic expression, shaping civilization. Compared to that, the decline in poetry's popularity in the modern era on a global scale can be seen as a natural process. This is because over time, various branches of knowledge and other fine arts gradually developed, leading to a natural division of creative minds, which in turn contributed to poetry's decreasing popularity. Now, if we examine the trend in the context of Assamese poetry, we observe that in the early stages of Assamese linguistic evolution, oral folk literature, Ujapali songs, Charyapada, and similar forms flourished between the 8th and 12th centuries under the hands of many poets from ancient Greater Kamrupa. Later in the medieval period, the landscape of Assamese literature underwent a complete transformation. Poetry played a crucial role in intellectually uplifting the entire Assamese society. In the 14th century, literary geniuses like Hem Saraswati, Madhav Kandali, Rudra Kandali, Haribhar Vipra, and Kaviratna Saraswati, followed by 15th century creative pioneers Srimanta Shankardev and Sri Sri Madhavdev, enriched Assamese poetry with various new branches. The impact of poetry during this period was so profound that it became an integral part of Assamese social and spiritual life, even enshrined in the Monikut sanctum of Namghars, Assamese prayer halls. Unlike other parts of the world where temples enshrine idols, in Assam, Namghars house secret manuscripts such as Gunamala, Kirtan Ghosha, or translations of Bhagavad Purana, Pada translation of Bhagavad Purana, a testament to the unparalleled reverence for poetry. Even today, the poetry of that era continues to resonate in Assam's cultural consciousness. However, with the advent of prose literature in Assam, particularly with the contributions of Bhattadev, Vaikunthanath Bhagavad Bhattacharya, 1558 to 1638, a subtle change emerged for poetry. Yet, despite this change, poetry's popularity did not wane in Assamese literature, whether in the Aurobindo era, the Jonaki era, or the Ramdhenu era. Even as Assamese literature transitioned from the pre-Romantic to the Romantic era, the prominence of poetry remained intact. During the late Romantic period and the early 20th century, poets like Dhirendra Chandra Datta, Devakanta Porua, Bhavananda Datta, and Amulya Borua paved the way for Assamese poetry to embrace modernity. The period saw a surge of new poets, and Assamese poetry not only flourished but also gained immense popularity. Until the late 20th century, compared to the other literary forms, Assamese poetry was undeniably dominant. This is evident from prestigious recognitions like the Sahitya Academy Award, which in its first ever recognition for Assamese literature in 1955 was awarded to a poetry collection on by Rabindranath Tagore. In the past 70 years, Nearly one-third of the Sahitya Academy Awards for Assamese literature have been conferred on the poetry collections, highlighting widespread acceptance. Moreover, among the three Assamese writers who have received the Jnanpith Award, one is the immensely popular and talented poet Nilamani Pupal. Hence, however, in recent times, particularly since the beginning of the new millennium, there has been a noticeable shift in the landscape of Assamese poetry's popularity. This shift is occurring in two ways. On one hand, its popularity has declined, while on the other, it has increased in certain contexts. Factors contributing to the decline of poetry's popularity. To understand this decline, we must examine the characteristics of modern Assamese poetry. Some key features include use of symbolism and metaphor, inclusion of themes previously considered unsuitable for poetry, use of seemingly incoherent language, cinematic techniques, interpretation, dramatic elements in imagery, extensive, extensive use of colloquial and spoken words.
Raji,
Okay, sir. I am coming to the conclusion.
yeah, please come.
Yes. Finally, we return to the question, has the decline been in quality or quantity? Evaluating history, we see that high quality works have always been outnumbered by lesser quality works. This reality seems to be more pronounced today. And popular works are not necessarily the highest quality, a truth applicable to all languages. With this, I conclude today's discussion, hoping for the revival of poetry's popularity, particularly in terms of quality. Thank you.
Thank you, Shongita ji. So before Shubhro to conclude, I just one thing I'd like to mention that popularity is also time specific and geographical specific. Just two names I give my drop. You think about during the Renaissance time in England, John Donne was no name, and John Donne became so popular in 20th century that he is now everywhere. Another name is Jivanananda Das from Bengal. He died unnoticed. His poems were not published. Some of them were published. His works were not noticed at all. And he is so mysterious, so, I should say, so difficult. He is now immensely popular in Bengal and rest of the country, and also outside America and also in France. So it happens. He was born in a wrong time, as John Donne was also born in the right time. Now we don't have time, so Shubhro will speak, I think. Shubhro to conclude, to finish.
थैंक यू चेयर, आपको मैं धन्यवाद देता हूं और आपसे इजाजत मांगता हूं हिंदी में बोलने के लिए। इस सत्र का नाम मैंने अपने दिमाग में अनुवाद कर लिया था आने से पहले, अब कविता कोई नहीं पढ़ता है। मैं यहाँ पे इस सत्र का प्रमुख सुबोध सरकार का एक किताब आप लोगों को दिखाना चाहता हूँ। ये जो है इसका ये 1997 का एडिशन है, वो तब का सेकंड एडिशन है। जब मैं कॉलेज में पढ़ता था, ये हमारे कॉलेज में अंग्रेजी पढ़ाते थे और मैं ज़ूलॉजी पढ़ता था और दूर से देखता था इन्हें, इनके क्लास में गैलरी आ जाती थी। वो जो भी पढ़ाते थे, बाकी बहुत सारे स्ट्रीम से स्टूडेंट्स आके उनके क्लास में बैठते, वो कैसे पढ़ाते थे ये देखने के लिए हम लोग भी दूर से देखते। ये अब तक शायद 5 एडिशंस तो हो ही चुके होंगे। 97 का ये सेकंड एडिशन है, more than that. So he's there, he's here among us. तो कविता अब कोई पढ़ता नहीं है, ये मुझे लगता नहीं है, क्योंकि हम लोग जो दिल्ली में रहते हैं, उनके सामने जश्न-ए-एकता एक अ, बहुत बड़ा उदाहरण है। जश्न-ए-एकता देखने के लिए लोग 1200-1500 रुपए के टिकट खरीद के अंदर जाते हैं। उसमें गज़लें पढ़ी जाती हैं, बिल्कुल। लेकिन वहाँ पे ये लोगों को ये दिखने को मिलता है कि अभी भी कविता सुनने के लिए लोग आते हैं। और इस नाम से मुझे और एक प्रश्न मेरे ज़हन में आया है कि कविता को लेकर लोग इतने चिंतित क्यों हैं? जैसे कोई विनाश होने वाली प्रजाति है आप हम लोगों के सामने। लेकिन ये ऐसी एक प्रजाति है जिसे हर कोई लिखना चाहता है। हर किसी प्रोफ़ेशन में रहते हुए लोग डॉक्टर, इंजीनियर, हम बंगाल में तो देख ही सकते हैं, यहाँ पे दिल्ली में हिंदी पोएट्री में देखी जा सकती है और बांग्लादेश की बात करें तो बांग्लादेश में हाईएस्ट पॉलिटिशियन टू somebody who is in working class वो भी कविता लिखना चाहते हैं। और दूसरी बात, लोग जो साहित्यिक उपन्यास हैं, जो लिटरेरी नॉवेल हैं, वो भी लेकिन कविता लिखन से पहले से ही इस दुनिया में है। शायद महाविस्फोट की यानी कि बिग बैंग की तरह कविता भी धीरे-धीरे अपना रूप से बिछड़ती गई। कोई गान का रूप ले लिया, कोई तारे का रूप ले लिया, कोई ग्रह का रूप ले लिया, तो कोई कहकशां का रूप ले लिया, यानी गैलेक्सी के रूप ले लिए। यानी कि महाकाव्य और गीत कविता होकर कोई और दिशा में चले गए। तरह-तरह के रास्ते बने, कोई भावुक कविता की ओर बढ़े तो कोई प्रेम कविता की ओर। इन सब में सबसे बड़ा विभाजन हो गया, जो हुआ, वो है कुछ कविताएँ सिर्फ पढ़ने के लिए और कुछ है हिंदी और उर्दू में मुशायरे प्रचलित हैं। हम भी सभी उनके मज़े लेते हैं, वाहवाही गूंजती है हमारे ज़हन में। जो पढ़ने की कविताएँ हैं, वो हम एकांत में अपने आप से रूबरू होने के लिए या होने के समय पढ़ते हैं। पुराने ज़माने में आध्यात्मिक कविताओं को इन दोनों तरीके से ही पढ़ा और सुना जा सकता था। समस्या है पोस्ट कॉलोनियल इंडिया में। अंग्रेज़ों ने हमको हमारे अपने जड़ से कुछ अलग कर दिए गए थे। लेकिन भाषा का स्वरूप शायद पानी की तरह है, जो तरंग उठे वो मिट भी जाते हैं। सदियों पुरानी बातें वापस आ जाते हैं। पूरी दुनिया में फिर से सुनने की कविताएँ वापस आ रही हैं। जो नाटक कविता से बिछड़ गए थे, वो भी परफॉर्मेंस पोएट्री के रूप में वापस आ गए। रैप, पोएट्री स्लैम, स्पोकन वर्ड पोएट्री, इंस्टा पोएट्री, बहुत सारे उदाहरण हैं। जैसे महाविश्व में बहुत सारे नक्षत्र हैं, जो हमारे अपने सूरज से बहुत ज़्यादा बड़े हैं, तेज़ हैं, लेकिन दूरी की वजह से उनकी असलियत हमें मालूम नहीं होती है। वैसे ही औपनिवेशिक 20वीं सदी हम नज़दीक से हमें नज़दीक से दिखता है और सबसे तेज़ लगती है। शायद इसलिए हमारे अपने भावुक परंपरा की कविताओं से थोड़ी-सी दूरी बन गई है। ऊपर से दुनिया भर में लोगों का अटेंशन स्पैन कम होते जा रहे हैं। इसलिए लगता है कि कविता कोई नहीं पढ़ता है। लेकिन हम जितने लोग यहाँ मौजूद हैं, उन सबके लिए कविता एक ज़रूरी चीज़ है और वो ही रह जाएगी। जैसे ही हम कोई गहरे अनुभव की ओर जाना चाहेंगे, तब हमें कविता के पास आना ही पड़ेगा। धन्यवाद।
बहुत धन्यवाद शुभ्र।
Uh,
Please, please, please.
before I invite
माँ
you
है?
for the
अच्छा 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 अच्छा
जी, please, sir.
माँ
एक मगही में कविता सुना देते हैं क्योंकि मेरी माँ यहाँ पर है और जो ये कविता है उसके बारे में मगही मगही जो लिटरेचर है उसके बारे में है और ये गुजरात के जो कवि हैं कवि की ये गजल है। हम हैरान हिए कोई लिखल कविता न है मगही में इधर उधर भागा हिए सन बैठे हिए कविता लिखी नहीं मगही में गली कुचा में सुने हिए लोग कैसे बोला हथिन मगही में ध्यान से सुने हिए सबके बोली चाली मगही में दिन रात चिरई जैसन चाय चाय करत हथिन मगही में ओखनी सबके कारी भी बढ़िया लगा है मगही में ठीक है को ठीक हको अच्छा आग गया को अच्छा आ गेलहू कहल जाहे है मगही में खाना खाए खनवा खैलहू चाय पिए चैया पीलहू ओबर है मगही में हम शहर में घूमल फिरल चल हिए किताब खोजते मगही में घूर के घरे आवे हिए बिन कोनो लिखल शब्द कैल मगही में घर पर माता जी प्रार्थना करा हथिन मगही में हमर बेटा के बुद्धि देव भगवान ई कविता लिखे में चाहा है मगही में।
Thank you, thank you. Now, it is going to, just a minute. This example is going to satisfy us with one verification, I should say. That is, it is not only time specific, but it is also place specific. Popularity. You know, Magad was center of culture, and Maghi was spoken at that time hugely, not only in Bihar, in other parts of the country. And now, possibly, this point that he read out is understood only by his mother. So you understand this is the history of India. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Sir,
Please.
कुछ बातें मुझे लगता है कि शुभ्रो जी ने जो उठाई थी, मैं उससे पहले आपको अध्यक्षीय वक्तव्य के लिए बुलाना चाहूंगा, because this session cannot be concluded without a chair's remark. This session cannot be concluded without. Sir, we have. Uh, I think जितनी यहाँ पर बातें हुई जो मैंने सुना, मुझे लगता है कि दो तीन सवालों के जवाब मिलने चाहिए। पहला कि या पहला कि जब हम कह रहे हैं लोकप्रियता, पॉपुलैरिटी, तो वो लोकप्रियता क्या है? दूसरा, जब हम कह रहे हैं लोकप्रियता घटी है, तो घटने का मापदंड क्या है? यानी किसके मुकाबले घटी है? क्या पहले बहुत लोकप्रिय था? तो कोई टाइम फ्रेम तो होगा जिसके हिसाब से हम ये कह रहे हैं कि लोकप्रियता घटी है। और शुभ्रो जी ने जो कहा कि जश्न एकता में बहुत सुनी जाती है, तो विद ड्यू रिस्पेक्ट उससे थोड़ी-सी असहमति है। वो इस मामले में कि आप किन फेसेस को बुलाते हैं, उस पर बहुत डिपेंड करता है। क्या वहाँ पर सब लोग गज़ल और मुशायरा ही सुनने आते हैं या किसी को देखने आते हैं? मसलन इससे पहले वाले सेशन में यहाँ पोएट्री सेशन था और 2 हॉल बगल में एक सेलिब्रिटी भी थी वहाँ पर। वो हॉल पूरा भरा हुआ था और यहाँ पर 4 लोग नहीं थे। कोई जी, खचाखच भरा हुआ। तो ये मुझे लगता है ये कुछ सवाल हैं। So, the chair of this session is Subodh sir. So I would like to invite Subodh Sarkar sir for chair's remark. Sir.
I think we should have an interaction with the members of the audience. That is far better. Amrita, do you have any question, please? और माता जी बेटे के लिए any question from anywhere? Anil ji. Please, Binayak Bandyopadhyay, an eminent poet from Bengal. Yeah, yes.
thousands of people from there. But M.P. Vasudevanath, he was also a legend in his own sense, but he was not that good. So, is there a rivalry or clash between popularity and popularity, or just as like in Shakespeare's example, we can say that they can go for
Yes, when Shakespeare wrote, he had only 400 people before him. And you imagine, he took 400 years to become Shakespeare. Shakespeare was not Shakespeare in Renaissance. He took 400 years, more than 400 years, and he wrote for an island. Those Ireland and England at the time was a terribly bad country. It was not a good country at all. It was in the making. So that is why it was Renaissance. So it was changing. The case of Tukaram, for example. Tukaram is such a great poet. I am hugely influenced by Tukaram, especially by the translations of Dilip Chit, uh, published by Penguin. So, so you can understand that how they were related to their own community, as Shakespeare was, as Tagore was. So you have to first attend your own people. You have to understand what they want. If there is a taste at, I mean, anywhere in Kolkata or outside Kolkata, any protest going on, so my readers expect me to write a poem. It is dangerous. It is not good always. That every time you have something bad that has happened and you have to write a poem, you can't. No poet can do it. Every time you cannot cater for your audience. And it doesn't come from within. So it's a crisis. As Binayak has pointed out, the popularity of poetry and at the same time the other genre of not being so popular, but good. So there is no clash between good poetry and good poetry. There is a clash between good poetry and bad poetry. So finally, popularity goes away. Finally, the name of the poet goes away, and the poet becomes anonymous. I think the most popular poet in this world is Mr. Anonymous in every language. That is why I think he's going to say, I think there is no clash between the popular and the good.
अच्छी बातें हो रही हैं और ये बात होनी चाहिए कि लोकप्रियता और अच्छी कविता, और क्या ये अनिवार्य रूप से विलोम है? क्यों लोकप्रियता क्या अच्छी कविता का विलोम है? विलोम नहीं है। अच्छी कविता लोकप्रिय भी हो सकती है, जैसा अभी आप जीवनानंद दास की बात कर रहे थे। हमारे वहाँ हिंदी में एक लंबी परंपरा है जहाँ अच्छी कविता मराठी में, हमारी हर भाषा में रही है। एक महाकवि भवभूत भवभूत ने कहा था अपनी कविता को लेकर, सोचिए उनके सामने कितना बड़ा संकट रहा होगा इसी तरह का कि पाठक नहीं रहे होंगे। उन्होंने कहा कभी तो कोई समान धर्म आएगा जो मेरी बात को समझेगा, जो मेरी कविता को समझेगा। तो कविता में कवि के पास तो अपार धैर्य होना चाहिए पृथ्वी की तरह का। जो कवि तत्काल लोकप्रियता चाहता है, भाग्य जाने उसको मिल जाए, वो अलग मसला है। लोकप्रियता अगर न भी मिल पाती है भी इससे उसकी गुणवत्ता कम, लोकप्रिय हो सकती है। Marathi में, when we read Marathi to a Bengali audience, you can ask Dilip Chitre and Korun Kolhatkar are very popular Marathi poets known by Bengali. If you go to Maharashtra, Namdev Dhasal is much more popular than them, but Namdev Dhasal is not that popular in translation. So when you take translation into account, you see that poets who are originally popular in their mother tongue may not be so popular in translation. Other poets may come. इसके साथ ये अलग चीज हो जाएगी। ट्रांसलेशन की अपनी एक राजनीति भी होती है। ट्रांसलेशन की अपनी एक राजनीति भी होती है।
Acha, I'll veer away from this popularity and time space. I'll 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 come to a new dimension to this topic today. I think we haven't touched upon AI, and I recently I just had time in my hand and I write a poem on this subject, as if written by myself in Guruji's life, and in 10 seconds, it came out, and I was pretty surprised that you know it could be me writing that. So I mean, we talked about technology, we talked about different platforms, we talked about uh, Instagram and YouTube and all. But AI is going to be a big disruptor, and I think we have not really dealt with, and I think it's not part of the subject today, topic today. But this is quite an interesting thing because it's just recently I happened to do that, and uh, is particularly if you have a lot of work in the public domain, the AI is going to learn and is going to write like you or any other author you like. You choose a topic, give the right prompts, and you will find that the poetry that comes out is so close you can't make out the difference between whether it's actually written by that poet or not.
To conclude, just one line from him and one line from Shubhra.
विनायक जी, नामदेव रसाल जी के बारे में एक लाइन। अभी अभी ये हुआ कि उनकी कविता एक मराठी सिनेमा ने इंक्लूड की अपने सिनेमा में। हाँ, तो सेंसर बोर्ड ने ऑब्जेक्शन दिया। और जब ये लोग गए तो पूछा नामदेव रसाल कौन है? तो एकदम ये फैक्ट है। अभी बवाल चल रहा है, कंट्रोवर्सी चल रही है मार।
Shubhra. Shubhra.
Of course, he is still a known face among poets. Of course, he's even last year he was. I mean, he's very well known face. No, but the only thing that is it's not an answer to your question, but the thing is like here the most daunting question, most important question for me is the absence of youth in this hall, and that is something that is everywhere in every for it is true for every Indian language. Even in the smallest of the small towns in India, we have English medium schools, and our children are not reading anything in Indian languages, not even in English. So English has the English that they get is probably some AI driven one, and the Indian language books are that is the real challenge, not poetry nor fiction. It's the challenge is the language. Yeah, that's a good thing. Yeah, they that's the attention span is the question here.
Thank. Yeah.
I just wanted to add that, poems are messages in the bottle, and you don't know which poem is going to work for whom, click for whom. And that decides, as uh, poetry can also be mushaira kind of poetry where you have the whole hall, but poem can also be, a light in the dark tunnel where it speaks individually to you. It just speaks to only one person in the whole universe. Thank you.
Thank you, Subodhji. Thank you, Abhayji, Guru Ladaki ji, Jitendra ji, Mahesh ji, Rajendra Mehta ji, Sangeeta ji, Subhro Bandyopadhyay ji. May I ask you please come forward for a group photograph? We have next session at 4:30.